Hello, this is Cindy Mazzaferro with Powerful Beyond Measure, and I am excited to have with you a really special author here today. Her name is Andrea Hanson, and she is a two-time best-selling author, master certified life coach, speaker, and creator of the Health Mindset podcast. She was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis herself in the year of 2000. And Andrea works with women living with autoimmune disorders and teaches a customized approach to health that includes mind-body balance, mindset tune-ups, and energy management. We'll be talking about that shortly.
Yeah.
She helps her clients go after their next big goals in life and business without giving up their health and healing that they're working so hard to accomplish. She received her bachelor's degree in psychology at the University of North Texas and her master's degree in human development with a specialty in early childhood disorders from the University of Texas at Dallas. Andrea has become a certified life coach at the Martha Beck Institute, a certified weight loss coach, and a master certified coach at the Life Coach School. As well as running her own coaching business, Andrea worked with the National MS Society as a speaker, coach, and workshop leader for various programs, which focuses on the importance of positive thinking when living with a diagnosis. So welcome, Andrea. I'm so excited to have you today as my guest.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
That's great. Well, your newest book is called Stop Carrying the Weight of Your MS. Isn't that a great, colorful book and really exciting?
Love it. Oh my God, I'm in love with this cover.
I am too. I love it. And you have another book that you had out before, which is Live Your Life, Not Your Diagnosis. And as a physical therapist myself, I think this is such powerful books because so often we allow our diagnosis to define who we are. Yes. And I love your books. So I'm really excited to get into the meats of it and really help people realize that we do not have to be defined by our diagnoses.
Absolutely.
So let's start with that. I know you were diagnosed in 2000 with MS, and that probably some of that might have inspired your book. But can you tell us what you really, why you're bringing this particular book out into the world?
Yeah, so both of my books are based on my own experiences in being diagnosed and kind of going through the system. And I realize that there's a lot of things that you don't find out from your doctor or your nurses, as well-meaning as they are. They're great, but there's just so much that I was like, gosh, I wish I knew that when I was first diagnosed. And so that's what both of my books are for. They're like, hey, these are things that can really help. They're coaching books. This book, in particular, is about my kind of wading into the whole weight loss, diet, working out kind of, ocean, if you will, because it's something quite often that when someone is diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder, they're looking at their health or at their food. They're going to go and they're going to say, okay, I need to look at a diet. I need to go sugar-free or gluten-free or stop doing this. They just kind of go there. And when you start to Google, you get on the internet and you start to Google, like, what should I eat? You get 500 different experts telling you 500 different things. And they're all very insistent, like, this is the diet. This is going to cure you, or this cured me, and this is what you do. And that's all great, but they're all different. And so how do you know? And quite often they're very involved, very intricate, very complex and hard to follow. And so when you're trying to figure out something to do with your food, and that can be a very emotional part of you, and you're coming out of this fear of this diagnosis, and you kind of have this added layer of, like, if I don't figure out this food, my diagnosis is going to get so much worse. So I have to, right? And there's just all of this fear and emotion and everything all wrapped up. And then you're going out into this world of people saying, you have to do what I say. And it can just be really just disempowering and tough and hard when you're trying to deal with a diagnosis anyway. And so that's what made me write this book. It's like, hey, let's look at this. It's kind of like giving people the armor that they need when they're going out and trying to find something that works. Like, this is not a diet book. I'm not giving you a diet, right? I don't want to, like, the whole point of this book is nobody knows what you should be eating except for you.
Right.
And, so
and
this
that's
book
why
really
and let me just go in there a little bit. So what I like about your book is that, first of all, our physical weight, the actual physical weight, can really play a very integral role in how easy it is to move within your disease, to actually do transfers, to move in bed mobility, and to walk up and down stairs. So weight, the physical weight, really can hurt or improve your symptoms with the disease. So it is a very important factor to consider and to be empowered to take action on it. So I think that's a very integral part from a physical therapist point of view, but also for the self-image part of the patient, of how they see themselves with now a diagnosis, as well as how they are seeing themselves as a female or male.
Yes, absolutely, because confidence is such a big part of this. You really have to have that confidence to be able to take your health in your own hands. You have hopefully a lot of doctors and people that can help you, but ultimately you've got to take the reins, and confidence is a big part of that for sure. And then, with movement, with a diagnosis like MS, working out can absolutely help your prognosis. Losing weight can absolutely help your prognosis. And then there's also the flip side, that if you are not healthy, if you're not eating well, you're gaining weight, you're not working out, you are at an increased risk of having another diagnosis, right? Diabetes or whatever else, another diagnosis. And then that starts complicating your MS, and it's a slippery slope. So there's a lot of different reasons why you want to look at your weight, you want to look at what you're eating, and you want to look at your exercise for sure.
Oh, exactly. So now, can anyone read your book, or is it really only for someone that has a diagnosis that they're dealing with?
No, I've definitely had people who have said, look, I don't have any of this. I don't have any kind of a diagnosis. And it still really helps, because the main core, I guess that's redundant, right? The core of this book is that you are taking control of your diet, you're taking control of what you do, and it's breaking this cycle that, the whole reason the diet industry is $1 billion industry is because they rely on people that keep coming back and then failing and then coming back and then failing. And one of the main reasons why they do that is because people are putting control in other people's hands. Right. They're not taking any type of ownership of really, what's working, what's not, what they know is going to, right? Like, once you take that ownership, you can carry that with you for the rest of your life. But if you keep relying on someone else to tell you what's going on, and you keep thinking that somebody else knows more than you about your body, it's this external control that that you're not going to be able to be consistent with. And that's not an MS thing. That's not a diagnosis of any kind thing, right? That's a human thing. So you don't have to have MS to really get things from this book.
And I so agree, because as you're talking about this power that we give away, we look for the answers outside of our bodies. That is actually a process that most of us sometime in our life do this. And it causes us to feel disempowered, and that we become more disenchantized with life. We're more frustrated. We feel like the external world is controlling our personal world, our inner world, within our body, within our health. And so it's really important, as you're talking about, to take this personal responsibility and find that power in ourselves, which is what I talk about in my book, Beyond Measure. It's that power within us to own it, to realize that we have some say in our weight, in our diet, in our exercise, and some of the things we're going to talk about in your book. So let's start with a really brief definition. I love your definition, but I'm going to let you say it. What is the diet? What is your diet? What's the definition of diet?
Honestly, diet is the food that you eat. That's it.
It's so simple. I love it. But that's what you said in your book. It's not what you're not supposed to eat. It's not that you're cutting this out. It's just what you eat.
Yes, it's not like deprivation. It's not anything. It's just the food that you eat.
Right. And so, wow, then all of a sudden is, oh, you mean I'm always on a diet because it's just the food I'm eating? And that's
Yes. It takes all emotional charge out of that.
Yeah, so that's just, I think, so powerful right there. And I love that simplicity to it. And so another thing is, I believe you are so right when you say that our bodies actually know what we need to eat.
Yeah.
And not from an emotional standpoint, because sometimes we feel depressed and might want that ice cream soda or chocolate or whatever is our soothing food. But I think intuitively, our soul often directs us. There's a famous energy worker, Donna Eden, who's written 7, 8 books. She also had MS, and she actually cured herself of MS. Where she has had all the tests and she's actually cured herself. But if ironically, they were telling her all to eat this leafy green things, everything that's organic and everything, and she was failing miserably. And she just, she was eating all the vegetables, stayed away from the proteins and and she was not able to walk anymore. It was really terrible. Anyway, she started listening to her body, and her body was saying, I need protein. And she ate more, meat type, the traditional fish and beef and all the different types of protein that are more traditional. And she started seeing big changes in her health and her physical capability. But I love that, you talk about that we have to almost in a way stop listening to the external world, that we also know what is really important for us nutritionally and what our body is, urging us to take in, to consume.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of times we're so cut off from that because we're so used to listening to other people, because, I'm sure she had, the authorities saying you need to eat leafy greens, you need to do this, you need to, the plant-based diet is so huge right now. The paleo diet is so huge. Right? I mean, there's all sorts of things, and it totally ignores the fact that we're all different. We all come from different backgrounds. We all have different, we live in different, we've grown up in different communities. It's like we are just different. Our bodies are just different. And what works for one person might not work for somebody else. There are foods like broccoli might not be good for everybody, right? It's like this crazy idea, but that's the thing. You've got to start that dialogue with yourself to start to find out, to really find out, like, hey, broccoli isn't awesome. And
for me, like, it's tomatoes. I love tomatoes. I crave tomatoes. And now tomatoes, you might think, is a very acidic food. It's actually a very basic alkaline food. But I love tomatoes. I'll eat 4 or 5 and cut them all up in a salad, without even the lettuce, just the tomatoes, because I love, and my body really loves tomatoes. So, so let's move on. One of the things I'd like to talk to you about, I went through your book and I have some additional questions there, so I want to just touch on some of the chapters that you really wrote, which I love, is emotions. So why don't you define emotions and then go into how you feel emotions play into our weight and what we eat?
So, so many layers to that question. Emotions, just at their basic level, emotions are vibrations in our body. That's what they are. If you think about when you're laughing, when you're crying, when you're really nervous, you feel it in your body, right? You're kind of shaking because you're laughing, and you're crying, or you've got a lump in your throat, or you've got like butterflies in your stomach. These are all just vibrations in our bodies. And on the very basic level, emotions are not good or bad. They just are. They all run through our bodies in the exact same way. What makes them good or bad are the labels that we put on them. And they have, for a lot of people, not for everybody, but for a lot of people, emotions play a very big role with food. We can tie, and I'm not saying this is, it's something that we think is happening. I'm not going to say that it's necessarily real once you really know what's going on and you really know what you're looking for and what you're thinking, but it can be common to think that you can find happiness in food. You can find comfort in food. So we tie all of these things to food that really have no business to be, to have any kind of a tie. And so we have this whole, like, I'm nervous, so I'm going to eat, or, I'm a nervous eater. You hear that a lot. Or I'm really upset. Like, I just broke up with my boyfriend and I'm so upset and I want the pint of ice cream and it just makes me feel better, right? Because chemicals are released in our brains. And the other part of it is sometimes when we're feeling emotions that we don't want to feel, the quickest way to stop an emotion is to eat a lot of food, because you're full, and that's a buffer, and you're not going to be able to really feel those vibrations in your body because you're really full, because you just ate a lot of food. So there's a lot of different ties between emotions and food.
It really is. It's a very complicated story, and I talk about energy with our emotions as well, because I think they are so entangled, and one of the things you said that was emotions are reactions to thoughts. And so we're having a thought, you're listening to this interview, you having a thought about it. We're so educated, oh, I love what they're saying, or I don't love what they're saying. You're having a thought to it, and with that, there's an emotional response to that. And so there's an energy to what we hear, what we think, what we say, what we feel. And often we look for a reaction to that, and often food is at the main component of how we deal with that. And so how does one take out, or how does one start to evaluate their diet, or just their consumption, because it's not really a diet of limitation here of what we're eating, a diet of consumption, what you're choosing to eat. How do you then choose to decipher, if you will, why am I eating this based on my thoughts or in my emotions? How does one actually investigate that with maybe a journal or whatever? Can you take us through that process a little?
Sure. Yeah. So that's where we really have to start that dialogue with our body. A lot of times, I know I did, when I first came to this work, I was totally numb. Like I would be like, I don't know what I'm feeling. I have no idea. Like it'd be ridiculous to me to think that my emotions would show you, right? So the first thing you got to do is start that dialogue, because you do have that emotional aspect, and you do feel emotions in your body, and emotions are created by what you're thinking. But then you also have your body and the nutrition that it needs. Mm-hmm. And your body talks to you, not verbally, but your body tells you if it likes food or if it doesn't like food, right? You have, like say you eat something and you feel bloated, or your digestion is awesome for the next day or two, or you break out, or your tongue swells a little bit, or, right? Like there's all sorts of things that our bodies do to communicate with us. And so the first part that you want to do is start just connecting with your body and starting a dialogue with your body, because you're going to want to be able to parse those two things out, because it can be very easy to say, oh, I have a craving for sugar, or I have a craving, so my body must want it, or I have a craving for ice cream, and think that that's because your body is saying, hey, I want some more sugar, I want some more ice cream, which almost never happens, right? It's not going to. So what you need to do is start to understand what your emotions are feeling or feel like, and start to ask yourself, okay, what am I thinking that's making me feel this way? I'm feeling really upset right now. What am I thinking that's causing me to feel this way? And that way you can start to trace down like, oh, okay, I'm upset, or I'm nervous, or I'm frustrated. That's why I'm reaching for this ice cream. It has nothing to do with the fact that my body wants it or not. And in fact, maybe your body doesn't want it, because once you eat ice cream, maybe you get phlegmy or something, right? Maybe something happens. Yeah. So the very first step is to turn inward and start that dialogue. And it's really like starting a relationship. Yeah. It starts slowly. Just tune in and do what I call a body scan, where you kind of go top of your head down to your toes and just notice what you're feeling. Just notice. And,
I love that, because so often when we disassociate from our body, we disassociate how we're feeling, because when you analyze your feelings and the thoughts that are behind it, that makes us self-discover that something is amiss, something is not making us feel comfortable, or we're feeling exhausted, we're feeling tired, we're feeling frustrated, angry. Any of the words you wanted to put there, they're there. That, yeah. So having that conversation with ourselves is really important. And I think, at least I have found, that if you actually create a safe space to write these things down, it's your personal diary. It allows you to have that freedom to write it down. And I think often some people don't like to, because then there's a journal of, oh my gosh, I wanted this craving. Oh my goodness, it shows that I'm weak, or I felt this way. And but what you're really doing is by not writing it down, you're hiding behind this wall of invisibility of not seeing how you really are feeling, and you're not even being authentic to yourself. So it's actually one of the reasons why you're still struggling with weight, because you still don't really understand what you're experiencing in life, in your emotions and your thoughts. Do you agree?
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's interesting because when we don't, put it on paper, and I do want to say, just because you're writing it down, it can be any form, right? For some people, it really helps. Like I have a worksheet where it just like shows the outline of the body, and it helps them to be very scientific about it and say, okay, this is what I felt and this is what's going on. And here's maybe a thought that I was thinking. For some people, like a long journal of like what's going on, that helps them. There's a lot of different forms this can take, but just the act of writing it down separates us from what we're thinking. And that's pretty genius, because when you're just having it in your head and you just let it kind of go and you don't really do anything besides notice it and then move on, number one, that thought's not going to go anywhere. It's going to keep going. And number two, it feels so much truer when you're just leaving it in your head. Yeah. When you write it down, you can say, oh, that's just a thought, right? There's something about the separation that happens when you're writing it down that really helps.
And what you might find is you might find a common theme, a common repetition of how often you're experiencing this thought or feeling. Yeah. And then really what I have found with my coaching clients too is that that will also segue into why we're not successful in relationships, why we're struggling with whatever aspect of our life you may want to be growing in. So what we're talking about, Andrea and I here, are really more than just feeling healthy nutritionally and having a good diet consumption. It's really about changing, we're going to get into this, changing our mindset as to how we thrive in life, both not just in what we eat and how we take care of ourselves, but how that infiltrates back out into the rest of our life, in interactions and work and personal life. So, so let me move on if I can, and talk about how positivity, motivation, how that is a integral in actually having the success that you want. How hard are those components to achieve? What do you do to use them to be successful in changing our diet?
Yeah, they're super helpful. It's exactly what you said. It doesn't matter. There's a lot of action that you can take, right, with your diet, with whatever it is. But action doesn't really mean anything if you don't change your mindset along with it. If you have the same old mindset and you're believing the same old thoughts that are probably not very motivating and not very positive, and probably a little bit fearful, because especially if you're coming to this with a diagnosis, if you're leaving that in play and then you're trying to change all of these things, it will not work. It'll happen. It'll be a really hard, like 2 months. And then it's going to come, you're going to start slipping, and you feel disempowered, and this whole thing happens, right? You must change your mindset while you're doing this. And using things like positive thinking can help. It's definitely a tool. It's not all about positive thinking. You don't always have to, believe daisies and unicorns for this to work. In fact, I say, sometimes really just getting rid of the resistance and just acknowledging, like, this is really hard. I'm really angry. I'm really sad. That is positive, because you're no longer pushing against it. You're no longer resisting that part of you. And that's the ultimate of where you want to get to, right? Is to really just let things flow instead of create all this resistance of, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way because that's not positive. Right. Shouldn't be thinking that. That's not positive, right? Like that creates more strife. So positive thinking is a really interesting animal. I got the opportunity to take a deep dive into it when I was doing workshops at the MS Society. And it's fascinating, because when you start identifying those thoughts that are maybe not so great, maybe those thoughts that are causing you to feel a little bit of angst that might be behind you eating foods that aren't great, that you don't want to eat, when you start to take those thoughts and turn them into something a little bit more positive, what you're doing physically in your brain is fascinating. When you're having those really negative thoughts, and they're cyclical, right? They feed on themselves. And so we're in this loop, it feels like, of negative thinking. Your brain is going into fight or flight mode, which means it has tunnel vision. It's not concerned with problem solving. It's not concerned with creative thinking. It's not concerned with any of that, because literally when you're in fight or flight mode, you have one option. That's it. You do not need creativity. Right. And so we can put ourselves in that spot just right now, just, even though we're not running from anything. And when you switch and you start believing, you got to believe it. So you can't just feed yourself thoughts that you don't believe. But when you start believing more positive thoughts, you get yourself out of that fight or flight, and so much more of your brain is actually physically available to you. Right. So you have creativity, you have problem solving, you have, like, literally you see more, like your visual cortex is expanding and seeing more. You're not so tunnel visioned anymore, and you're able to make much, much better decisions about food, about anything. And so positive thinking is really a fascinating thing and a really great tool. And it can feed into motivation, because motivation, what that works off of is really achievement. You achieve something, you acknowledge it, you let yourself really feel that achievement, and it's just going to motivate you more. So it all kind of plays together, but it's a really fascinating thing, and how it works and how important it is.
It certainly is. It certainly is. And it's becoming true to yourself. It's allowing you to have the truth of what you're feeling, experiencing. And even if it's a negative feeling, that's okay. At least you're being true and not hiding it with the food that you're eating, So I know I personally lost 50, 60 pounds when I got rid of the emotional weight that resides within myself from when my parents were divorced, and holding that energy of how can someone love you and walk out of your life. So we all have this emotional energy that lies somewhere dormant in our inside and is affecting our health. And so there's an emotional energy and emotional weight that we carry, whether we carry in our shoulder, we carry in our stomach, our throat. We can carry this pain within ourselves, and it definitely can impact us in our physicality and our health. So very important to get to this truth.
That's why it's named Stop Carrying the Weight of Your MS, right? Because getting a diagnosis can weigh on you and create all of that energy that you were just talking about. It doesn't have to be something from your past. It can be something that you just were handed 5 minutes ago when you were given a diagnosis.
Oh, yeah. And it doesn't have to be even that terrible a diagnosis. It could be, I have high blood pressure, which so many of us do. Or the doctor, you go to your PCP, you get your annual checkup, and you're borderline obesity, because all the little figures, all the scales have changed now where, you're at a certain benchmark and you're on that close to obesity. And then all of a sudden you hear that word. It's like your self-esteem, your what you view yourself, how you view yourself. It just is a spiral that makes you feel so inept in how, so now all of a sudden you're treating your high blood pressure, or you've been diagnosed even, it's like, I've got to cut out salt. Well, I never really had salt. Oh, I got to cut out this. And then all of a sudden it's a life of limitations that you now have to live within the constraints. And instead of being empowered to realize what kind of got me here, that I needed to deal with those underlying issues that maybe I wouldn't have put on all this extra weight. So it's very much a living, breathing organism of how we feel. And we need to address that. And I love your book because it talks about that aspect. That's part of coming up with this healthy diet of what we choose to consume. And that means energy. That means our emotions, our thoughts, not just calories.
Right.
I love that you bring that all into your book. So just to kind of wrap up, towards the end of the book, you talk about what are the most common pitfalls. So can you share a few of those with us?
Yeah, some pitfalls. I'm trying to think of like some of the main ones I see. One of the big pitfalls, and you kind of touched on it, is how we talk to ourselves, how we think about ourselves. It's a huge pitfall, because quite often the way we talk about ourselves, or like the inner narrative, we would never talk that way to other people, like ever. Like you'd be like, I'm ending this interview because you're being so mean, right? And So it can really halt success because it affects things like motivation, it affects being empowered, it affects your confidence, it affects all of that.
Mm.
And so it's really something that we need to be aware of. Number one, a lot of times, like, we're not even aware that it's happening until we really start looking at it. And we need to be honest with yourself, right? It's that authenticity that you're talking about. Really, like, you think you're being tough on yourself because it's good and it motivates you, but does it really? Like, look at that, write it down, right? Write down what you tell yourself or what you do to yourself, and really scrutinize it. Is that really motivating me, or is that actually making me feel really small and insignificant and maybe not helping? So that can be a really common pitfall. We think we need motivation, and we think we're being tough on ourselves because this is what needs to be done, and we're cutting ourselves off at the knees.
I love that. I think you are so right. And I think, with that same thought process is, don't be afraid to say something loving to yourself.
Yes.
Hey, I spent 3/4 of the day really eating healthy and I feel great about it. And you know what? I'm not perfect. And yes, I faltered a little bit.
Right.
And that's okay too. I love myself. I love what I'm energy and the effort I'm putting into living a healthier life, and give you those kudos, if you will, that you are
Totally.
making positive changes. Yeah.
Totally, because cheesy poofs happen, right? Ice cream happens. And one thing that I suggested, and it's, sometimes it sounds a little strange, but if you catch yourself being mean, apologize, right? Because what are you going to do if you're mean to a friend and you're like, oh, that was mean? What are you going to do? Like, ignore it and pretend like it never happened? Right?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's very soft and kind and considerate to yourself, as you would to someone else, right? You would be
100%.
showing empathy and sympathy to them, and we can do the same to ourselves. I love that.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So what parting words would you like to tell our audience about creating a healthy diet for themselves?
Mm-hmm.
And then follow up and let us know how we can find your book and connect with you on a website.
Yeah. So my parting words, you can do this, right? And I know the reason why I know you can do this is because everybody has the capacity to connect with their bodies, connect with their cells. Even if you've never done it before and you would swear that your body is just numb and you can't feel anything, you 100% can connect with your body and really listen to it, really have that relationship with it, where you know what is going on with what you're thinking and how you're feeling, and you're knowing when you're eating certain foods, how that really feels. Are you really helping yourself? It's the most loving thing that you can do, and nobody else can do it for you. There's plenty of people who say that they can. There's plenty of people who say that they know better than you. You know better than everybody. You are the expert. You have the qualifications to be your own expert. And it's the key to being able to do this as a lifestyle change, because this is a lifestyle. This is not just for 50 pounds or for the next 6 months or until you're cured or whatever it is. This is for the rest of your life. So, take control, take that seat at the head of the table, and know that you can absolutely do this.
Love that. That sounds great. Okay, well, why don't you show everyone your book again? And I know her book is through Morgan James Publishing, which we absolutely love, same publisher as mine. And it's available worldwide through any online site, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or any physical bookstore, Books A Million, BAM, Barnes & Nobles, anything. And it's, again, Stop Carrying the Weight of Your MS. And it's really, and I want to also add too, and you make sure you correct me if I'm wrong here, this is about a healthy lifestyle, how to achieve this healthy diet. And it doesn't mean only losing weight. It means if you're a certain person that needs to gain weight, again, the mindset, the positivity, the aspects that Andrea talks about in her book are all about this healthy, creating this healthy vessel that we live in, our spirit lives in. And so is that right, Andrea? It's for anybody, whether
100%. It is. It's really for wherever you are. And like I said, when it says stop carrying the weight, it's that emotional weight that happens with MS. And you can learn more by going to my website, which is at AndreaHansonCoaching.com.
Great. And Hanson is Hanson, Andrea
Correct.
Hanson Coaching.com.
That's right.
Well, thank you, Andrea. This has been really insightful and so
Thank
inspiring.
you.
And I really hope all of you will go on some of the online sites, check out her reviews. There's a part of the book you can read and get a snippet. And, you know, whether you're buying it for yourself or someone else, it's a great read. And I encourage you all to consider how can you improve the health of your physical vessel. You know, it's really important. And
Absolutely. Thank you.
you're welcome. And thank you, Andrea, for sharing your journey with MS. And, you know, you look wonderful. It's many years you've had MS, and
Feeling good.
you don't look like you're living a diagnosis. And we all know MS can be very much life-changing and really crippling in so many ways. So you must be doing something right, which is great.
Well, thank you. This has been so much fun. I feel like we were talking for like 2 minutes. So.
I know. Well, I have enjoyed you too much as well. And you know, we speak different, same language, but in different concepts. And I think that, you know, I think our work is so important, and I think empowering people to take responsibility to really see this truth that we talk about, and to realize that we hold the power within ourselves to achieve all our greatness, whatever it is that we're trying to experience, whether it's weight, a certain ideal weight, whether it's aspiration, goals, just achieving happiness in our life. All of these things are attainable, and we are really the stewards of our life. And so I encourage all of you to reach out to these wonderful authors that I'm bringing to you. There's so much wisdom in their books, and then there's personal stories. And I am so honored to have you, Andrea. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. This has been fantastic. Have a good one.
Thank you. And thank you all for spending a few minutes with us listening to Andrea about her fabulous book. And I hope you check it out. Again, this is Cynthia Mazzaferro with Powerful Beyond Measure, and have a blessed day. Take care.